COVID-19 may have impacted all of us, but we are not all impacted equally. It has disproportionately affected women's health and overall well-being, particularly for those who are living in contexts where public healthcare systems are dismal and vaccines remain inaccessible. The pandemic has exposed and worsened long-standing social and gender inequalities that are manifested in many forms and are operating at different, intersecting levels and infringes upon women's rights. Among them, women's rights to life, health, bodily autonomy, equality and non-discrimination, and freedom from violence. The experience with COVID-19 exposes how healthcare privatization, inadequate social safety nets, and weak labor rights have left the majority of the world's countries vulnerable. In order to prevent already overwhelmed health systems from collapsing, governments have resorted to lockdowns, curfews, and increased police presence to contain the spread of the virus. These measures are selectively enforced based on social class, and women and LGBTQIA+ are often harassed by police in communities. Social class and race also determine who is allowed to travel and move freely. Inequality is stark on a global scale as northern countries begin mass vaccinations and look forward to recovery, while the global south deals with new COVID-19 surges, strains, and variants. The current context shows us that once again, preparing, mitigating, and responding to health crises is inevitably about examining and abolishing the inequalities in our society. We call to end inequality pandemic. 90% of the world's countries have experienced disruptions to essential health services. Among the most affected services are sexual and reproductive health services. In countries where abortion is restricted, governments were less likely to address SRHR impacts of the pandemic. For some, the pandemic became pretext to intentionally roll back on women's rights and introduce regressive policies, particularly anti-abortion and anti-transgender legislation. We demand governments and institutions to recognize that women's health matters and SRHR is essential. Even before the pandemic, women's health is already not prioritized at the household level. Needs of other family members are often prioritized when essential services like education and healthcare become too expensive. Women and girls are also likely to lose out when vaccines are rolled out, if not made widely available, even as they make up 70% of the healthcare workforce and are at the front lines of their own communities. The pandemic has also resulted in a mental health crisis among women, where women cite unpaid care burdens as their main source of stress, in addition to worries about livelihoods, food, and healthcare. Tensions from economic hardships also put women at more risk to gender-based violence. Decreased access to SRHR and increased risk to gender-based violence show how the pandemic harms women and girls' ability to decide over their bodies. So join us in challenging inequalities and demanding accountability for the systematic neglect and denial of SRHR services to women and girls.